Good morning, readers. Well, today is, it's April 15th. We're halfway through April and it's time for a new release. And I actually have three new releases for you today. They are the next three books in the Parks Pat mystery series. This is a novella series, so these are a little bit shorter, which is why I have three releasing at the same time. And you can pick those up today. I'll put buy links in the comments below. And as usual, I will do a reading today, and I'm going to be reading from chapter 1 of Immersed in the View. So this is book number 4 in the Parks Pat series. This one takes place in Valley View Park. If you're not familiar with the Parks Pat series, these are murders that take place in Calgary and area parks. And Detective Margie Patenaude, Detective Pat, one of her nicknames is Parks Pat because she has been involved in a number of these murder investigations. So she's now assumed to be the expert in murders that occur in parks. Margie was puffing by the time she got to the park. She was getting into better shape. She could go farther than she'd been able to when she started, but she was still in pretty sad shape compared to what she had been as a beat cop, getting plenty of exercise walking the streets. Sitting at a desk was not good for her, and she'd not been getting as much exercise as she thought she would once she arrived in Calgary. She still hadn't started cycling into work, using the new pathway over Deerfoot and under Blackfoot, then through Pierce Estate Park and continuing downtown. She'd followed it a couple of times on Google Maps to make sure she knew the way, but hadn't yet tried it in real life. She was working her way up to it and wanted to make sure she knew the route really well before she tried it, not wanting to get turned around and lost. She had promised herself that once she reached Valley View Park, she would give herself a break, walk around the park, have a drink of water, take a few pictures, and get her breath back before returning home. The whole route was only about 3 kilometers, and once she was comfortable with that, she intended to increase the distance by adding a loop through the pathways by the Max Bell Arena. Calgary had a lot of green space and pathways. She might as well make use of them. Margie slowed to a walk. It was a clear morning, the sun shining brightly, and the greens of the trees and blue of the pond looked like a painted picture. Despite the early hour, it was already 18 degrees Celsius. Actually, it hadn't gotten below 18 the night before. The last few days had had 36 to 38-degree highs, almost unheard of in Calgary. Most homes, the ones in Margie's neighborhood anyway, did not have central air conditioning. She'd been lucky enough to find a window AC unit a month before when the first heat wave had hit at the beginning of June. It was never 30 above the first week in June, she was told. There had been a few flakes of snow on Victoria Day just a week before that. Calgary didn't normally hit 30 until August. With the AC unit in Margie's bedroom, they could at least sleep. Christina had said at first that she would be fine in her own room. She didn't need to come sleep with Margie like a little kid who'd had a bad dream. But that didn't even last a full night. With the house heating up and holding on to the heat, Margie's bedroom and the unfinished basement were the only tolerable spaces. Now it was already Canada Day, July 1st. Margie didn't have to go into work, and Christina was out of school, so they had stayed up a bit late the night before to watch a movie while they waited for the house to cool. But Margie had promised herself that she would still go for a run, and she knew that she would need to head out by 6 if she wanted to beat the heat. She was glad she had. She nodded and said good morning to an elderly man walking around the pond with a cane. She'd seen him there before, and she could see a couple with a pair of dogs approaching that she recognized as well. A lot of people wanted to get out and enjoy a bit of fresh air before it got too hot. Margie sipped her water, then put it back into the holder on her running belt and took out her phone for a few pictures. She walked by the little waterfall, bubbling happily away. Even just this little slice of nature, listening to the trickle of the water and the whistles of the red-winged blackbirds, helped to restore her peace and serenity after all the recent news. Down below that, There was a marshy area with cattails and some scum and plant matter floating on top of the water. There was something in there. She'd seen a muskrat a couple of times in the pond and figured that was probably what it was. She He was remarkably brave about all the people and dogs who walked around the pond. Most of the time he just ignored them till they got right to the edge of the water, and then he would dive, disappearing below the surface. But as she got closer, she could see that whatever was in the water was much larger than that. It was obscured by the weeds, but it looked as though someone had dumped a dark blue suitcase into the water. A short distance away she could see the bottom of a shoe floating on the surface of the pond, which confirmed to her that it must be luggage. Why would somebody throw that into the water? Margie left the pathway to get closer to the water's edge, where she would be able to see better. The closer she got, the more clearly she could see that it was not a suitcase and random assortment of clothing that had been dumped into the water. What she had initially taken for the fabric side of a suitcase was the broad back of a man in a denim shirt. The shoe she could see floating a few feet away was still on the foot of its owner. Okay, so that is the first chapter from Immersed in the View. And I still have a few pictures on the side here, so let's flip through those a little bit. These ones are quotes from Skimming Over the Lake, which is book number 5. This one takes place at Elliston Park, which is also in the east end of Calgary. And then book number 6, also released today, is Hazard of the Hills, and this one takes place in Edworthy Park, which is in northwest, southwest Calgary. I guess it's southwest. At least the one entrance is. You can see the downhill bikers at the top of this hill, the trails down the hill where they've ridden down this very steep slope before. I snapped off the pictures and then didn't want to stay around to see anybody crash at the bottom. So these are the 3 books: Immersed in the View, Skimming Over the Lake, and Hazard of the Hills, which are all being released today, and you can buy them following the links below. And there are all 6 in the series so far. So we have Out with the Sunset, which is at Fish Creek Park, Long Climb to the Top, which is at Glenbow Ranch Provincial Park, Dark Water Under the Bridge, which is at Ralph Klein Park, and then the 3 releasing today, Immersed in the View, Skimming Over the Lake, and Hazard of the Hills. So I hope that you will pick those up and enjoy reading this Easter weekend. For those who are celebrating Easter or Passover or any other springtime holidays, then all the best. I will be back next week.